You could certainly have a component of this tourism which would be much more personalized and in which people all over the island would, you could say, I live on the island, I would like to have a botanist in my house, or I'd like to have an archaeologist, or I'd like to have someone who is I don't know, whatever. One of these professions that would be involved in these different meetings. And then that person would know that Catarina and Ricardo were expecting them. And I mean, you could make something that would be much more friendly, human, and involving, and not just because, unfortunately, mass tourism really, I don't think they know exactly where they are, because it's the same scene everywhere. And maybe you won't think this is democratic, and probably it isn't, because it would be smaller in number, but I think everybody should have access to what I call cultural knowledge or immaterial tourism. And so it can be made accessible, but it can't be done at the same mass level, because that's simply, I think, destroying.
Very good. Jose, would you like to comment on this proposal?
Well, I understand the proposal, but the mutation is very difficult. Not only here, but for the people who are coming. Because when you talk about 12 million people coming, that means that these people have to change their mind also. And this is going to be very difficult, because their way of life in Germany, in France, or everywhere, the people are coming. They come here the same way they come in south of France or in some other place, or in Canary Islands where I was 2 months ago. They want sea, and that's all.
That's all.
And sun.
Sun. Sea and sun.
That's why I'm proposing that there not be 12 million.
Yes, but that's why I think we have to explain how can people change their way of life, because the way they're going on holidays,
they're escaping.
It's the same way they live. It's the same way of life.
Yeah.
So there's time for work, time for making quick holidays. So it's very difficult. So that needs to modify also all the way of life during the rest of the year. So it can begin from here, of course. But that means that you have to change even the kind of place they live in when they are here. I think the kind of hotels. It's impossible. The big towers are not possible with that. So you have to change this slowly, how to bring this out. And so I'm sure it's important to try to do it. But it's for me, it's kind of an utopia. An utopia.
Utopia, kind of utopia.
So it's difficult for me to go inside of that, expect to say, well, we can try to build another kind of tourism, and to be able to give a challenge to the mass tourism. Okay. Now you can have the choice.
Yeah.
There's not only one possibility, there's the other one. When Susan was talking about their airport, I was remembering my visit around the airport of Narita in Japan. There the people have been fighting during 20 years against this airport.
Yeah.
And so this is quite different, of course. And they only could put on one place for the plane to get out, because they resist so well that all the rest of the place which had been taken for making the airport are still fields and farms. And so the community is still around. And so now they know that they have to put this airport out, because they, of course, less planes can go on this airport. So this is also interesting to see that you have to stop, because if there are more people coming, maybe you need to have a bigger airport.
Yeah.
And so you have to say someday stop.
Yeah.
You have to stop getting more and more infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think this is also a collective responsibility.
Okay.
To say we have to stop buildings,
Okay.
have to stop infrastructure for big airports and so on. You have this is a political responsibility.
Yeah.
And if this should be a decision of the people here to say stop.
Yeah.
Now we have enough.
Yeah.
And it's impossible for the next year to have more.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe this is maybe the first answer.
First answer, yeah. Thank you.
We stop with that.
Yeah. Before I come to Herbie, would you like to respond to what...
Well, no, I mean, I think I'm not sure it's that utopian. I forgot to say one thing both this morning and now. When you want to convert a space, in other words, not always the principle, don't destroy, convert, and look at it differently. I would get groups of young graduates, bright young graduates in engineering, in finance, in law, in art, in architecture, in urbanism, etc. To go, you pick a really bad place here. I mean, I would say Magaluf. I was actually proposing that you just give it away to the Chinese or the Japanese and let them pay a high rent, which would finance many other things.
But they don't want to go into a bad place, though.
That started as a joke. It started as a joke. Now I'm thinking about it really seriously because it's a little place that could just, I mean, Palma Nova and Magaluf has got that highway at the top, and it could just be cut off and given away to the Chinese, and they would have to decide how, I mean, they would have to deal with the energy, the water, the food problems, etc. But that was just to be far out and brainstorm this morning. But I would bring together young, bright graduates to all expenses paid on their university holiday, and they would look at a space together, and you would say, all right, we want this space transformed. Give us a plan in a month. And let them play with it and see how would they manage that space at minimum cost with maximum satisfaction for the islanders and for the people who would use that space.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add.
Herbie?
Now, obviously, we've talked earlier on about oil prices and the travel costs and so on. And if it's really true that we are heading towards peak mobility, then by definition, that would affect the way tourism happens, and particularly also how people can afford to travel. You know, I mean, EasyJet or Ryanair are getting a little bit more expensive now, but not much yet. And meanwhile, of course, oil prices for the moment are going down again rather than going up as a result in part of recession. So certainly, I mean, I think what you were saying earlier on about the question of peak oil certainly is a key component in this discussion. But in the context of bringing about this change, I think we certainly need to do more studies on the kind of financial benefits of tourism to the island itself at the moment.
Right.
And it is certainly true to say, as far as I understand it, maybe you have some comments from you about this, that the bulk of the money ends up in the coffers of English companies, German companies, rather than in the bank accounts of people on this island. Now, if that is the case, then of course that needs to have serious examination, and that in itself could then begin to bring a change of perspective about in the minds of islanders here. The other point that we haven't really raised very much came out of a brief conversation I had over lunch, which is the environmental externalities of tourism. And we've already talked about climate change and associated issues of the impacts of energy use on the global climate. But what we haven't talked about very much is the impacts on the oceans, and particularly the coastal waters. Now, there's a lady over there, and I don't even know your name, I'm sorry, who's making films about this. I was a filmmaker for many years, and I have never filmed underwater, but I certainly had colleagues who did so. And I once saw a film that really shattered me, which was a film comparing what had happened to the offshore underwater landscape of Marseille, off the coast of Marseille. And this filmmaker had been taking pictures there in sort of early 1960s, and then again 20 years later. And what had been a flourishing underwater landscape in the early 1960s had turned into a desert by the 1980s, and I shudder to think what has happened to that underwater landscape in the meantime. Now, I think we are not aware of these changes. The sea from above, and even if you swim in it, and don't snorkel or have an aqualung, doesn't look that different. But the huge changes, not only because of pollution, but also because of bottom trawling and all the other things that we briefly already referred to earlier on. These are shattering changes, and they can even be quantified in pounds and dollars and euros. And I think we need to have much greater awareness of these impacts. And once these impacts are in our minds, and particularly in the minds of people
But when you talk
here,
about impacts like this, who will measure these impacts? Because the tourist industry is interested in money.
yeah, but the tourist industry itself is getting more sophisticated, I would have thought as well. And in the end, you are also interested in a continued presence of tourists here, and not ultimately in a destroyed, currently, a moment ago I was talking about underwater landscape, but tourism also affects the landscape of Mallorca itself. I saw the motorways.
Do you think there should be a separate organization to monitor the impact of tourism, which has no vested interest in tourist industry itself?
Yes, certainly it needs to be an objective look at the situation in order to get greater awareness. And then I think you're absolutely right. One of the things about why do people come here? First and foremost, they want to look at the magnificent cathedral, which, in Palma, where lots of people are milling around. Now, this is the manifestation of cultural creativity 800 years ago. And all the energies of people at that time went into creating beautiful environments for themselves. Now, we don't do that today. This is the culture or mobilization, as I said earlier on, covering landscapes and motorway. That becomes ugly landscape, and that ultimately does not attract people. So quality is critically important in all the discussions we're having here, and that can certainly lead to reductions in numbers and raising the expectation of people.
Thank you. Ross, would you like to make comment on this?
Make the decline a little less than it would else be.
Good.
And then another thing that it's on my mind after having toured the island here for some time. There are a lot of very, very wealthy people who have bought huge villas and spent enormous amounts of money. And I heard that market for buying and selling of those houses have stopped and is declining a little bit. But these people, they love Mallorca. They come here 5-6 times a year, and they have money enough for traveling. And they love Mallorca. And I think it's a group that you need to include and to meet and embrace. And communicate with them, see how would they try to help restore the island, restore all the beautiful stone terraces, restore the olive trees, make this a flourishing nature where it has been dying slightly the last 30 years. I think that they would be more than willing to help if you gave them a chance where they could say, I want to support putting up so-and-so number of windmills, I want to support cleaning of wastewater, I want to support restoring of nature, I want to support local food production. I'm sure that they would feel really happy to give money for this.
Okay, Herbie?
Yeah, just one brief point in addition to what's already... We were discussing last night the issue of an eco-tax and how that hadn't worked very well. The hotel owners were rejecting it, and they were even getting to the point of assuring that this would be discontinued and so on. And it occurred to me, really, maybe the reason for its lack of success was that it was very abstract, maybe to do with more recycling or other activities that people did not experience themselves. But if there was such a thing as a fund for the future, I think that's probably the best term so far, even fund for future generations. That could mean everybody on this island, either has children, or there are children, or indeed they have friends who have children, there are relatives, who have children, and so on. So everybody is concerned about future generations in one way or another. And this is something that tugs at the heartstring much more than an abstract sort of green tax. And therefore, it had occurred to me that given the fact that basically the resources of this island, you could say, effectively are being run down at the present time as a result of the tourist onslaught and all the paraphernalia that are linked to it, would it be worth thinking about using the wealth of many of the people who have settled here full-time or part-time, as well as the tourists who are here maybe for a much shorter period of time, as a kind of way of attracting funds that are specifically concerned with creating a solid base for future generations, including those who are already alive today. You know, in terms of job creation, in terms of cultural development, in terms of assuring that young people have a perspective on how to recreate the communities in which they live. And
So it'll be a kind of tax, will you?
well, a fund, you see, not a
No, but
tax
how
is
do you collect it?
basically you would go to people who are wealthy or you know who arrive and say, you know, your few pounds or maybe it can be or euro can contribute to a fund that could help communities across the island to re-establish themselves as farming communities, as cultural communities, creating cultural activities of various
But to clarify, how will it be different from, say, many charitable foundations which exist?
Well, it would,
For example,
it would be in part be a charitable foundation. Whether or not government got involved in this, I don't know. I mean, we can discuss this because, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly there was a lot
so
of
for
interest.
example, Ford Foundation is a pot of money securely kept for the future, and generation after generation after generation, they pay for whatever good cause they believe in, but the money is there for future. So how your suggestion will be different from...
Well, it doesn't have to be
current-
different. And the main thing that I'm concerned about is that such a fund could come into existence to help people who are growing up today to get a sense of a better future, a sustainable future that would help them in job, training and in cultural development and that kind of thing.
No.
There's nothing wrong with it being a charitable foundation, but it could also be something that one could persuade government to pick up and turn into something that also involves, the political parties, the political process.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Examples not of foundation, but of tax for the future. And I believe that is an interesting way. There's one which is quite known, is the tax for future in Norway, where the government keeps a part of the money of oil for the next generation, for the moment where there's going to be any more oil. And part of the benefits of the oil is kept for the old people and for the new generation.
Yeah.
So this is quite interesting. There's another place in Ecuador,
Yeah.
in South America, where they're trying to say, well, why don't we put a tax on the exportation of our oil or our mines and so on?
Yeah.
Say, this is part of our country, and when there's going to be any more natural resources, we'll have no more money. So we have to keep a part of the money. We can maybe have the same kind of idea about tourism. If we think that mass tourism is not, it's impossible to increase it more and more and more, that means that it's going to get maybe little if there's a peak oil problem and so on.
Yeah.
So all the mass of the money, which is now here, if we don't take a part of this money to build a new future for the island, it's going to be crazy. So I think this is a necessity. So the problem is that, of course, if this tax are taken by the government, people will say, well, they're going to use this tax directly now for their own activities.
Yeah.
So this is the problem, I suppose. But this, you can always say, as Norway, that this money is public, we know where it is, and we put it for the future. So we don't use it directly in the way of going on by the government. So this is possible. And I think it's important to be a tax on the airplanes, on the tourists each night, be here. But also, I want to say, on the people, on the owners of houses we were talking about.
Big houses.
A guy who has only 1 month's occupation or 2 months of the house and has 10 months with anything inside, nobody in the houses, he should pay a very big tax to eat all his benefits of the 2 months.
Yeah.
Because it's not normal that somebody can have 10 houses only to have too many tourists in these houses at the moment, or a lot of people are waiting to have a house. So we need to have to be very clear with this.
Yeah.
This is not aggressive. This is only looking for future.
Yeah.
So I think there's one idea is to say that we need more farmers and young farmers here in the island to be able to increase the production of food and diversified food in the island. So I think this is the principle. So that means first that all the authorities and the civil movement has to put this in the front line for the island. That means that no more land on the countryside should be taken for making building, houses, and so on.
And roads.
And roads. If you have farming land disponible, it should be for farming. So that means that you need, first thing, to make a chart of the situation, to be able to see what is going to happen. A map, of course. A map of the situation, and to be able to know what exactly is the situation.
Yeah.
After you're on this map, you see which are the cities, which is the land for farming. Second card, you put all the owners. What kind of owners you have? Big owners, people who have only 1 hectare and so on, who have nothing. And we put this is the second map. And after that, we see how are the possibilities for young people to go to access to the land. So some of them I discuss during
Lunchtime.
yes, there is time that some old farmers are giving the land to young people, and this is quite beginning. This goes on, but it's not going to be enough. That means that we need to have more land. More land. That means that the big owners have to accept, because these lands are not used, to give this land to the young farmers. So they can keep the land. This is not a problem for me, for them to sell the land or not. I prefer they keep the land, but they have a contract with the young farmers, saying you can still here until for all your activity. And that's why I think we have to discuss not about owning land or so, but about using land. It's the use of land. And this, I think, is a new way of discussion about land. The use of land.
Yeah, not ownership.
No, people can keep the land, but if they don't use it and don't give it for farming, they could have sanctions against them. This is important.
Yeah.
Which is important is the activity you can do on the land.
Yeah.
So that means that we need maybe a new kind of school of agriculture. I don't know if there's a school of agriculture here.
Yeah.
Maybe there is, I don't know. We need to build a real agriculture school with new kind organic way of going on and so on, to have a new way of going on for young farmers.
Right.
So land, school for teaching organic agriculture, and also the same problem I was talking this morning about houses, because this is, I think, a very dramatic situation when people are not able anymore
To live. But
to live.
let's stick with the land for the moment.
The land for them.
Yeah, land.
I wonder if the way that the Danish agriculture works might be the answer here. Apparently it's quite different. I didn't realize that. But in Denmark, if you own a piece of agricultural land, you have 2 obligations. One is you have to live there, point 1, no absentee landlords. And point 2, you must run it with a responsible form of cultivation. Yeah, it's quite broadly defined.
Yeah.
And also,
And you are not cultivating then?
then you can be removed. You can be forced to sell it.
Okay.
And it also is quite common in Denmark for people who do not wish to cultivate it themselves to rent it out, as you were suggesting, at negotiable terms. And for any land which is more than 2.5 hectares, these are the rules that apply.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder, is this the situation here at all, or not? Would that work here? That kind of law? It certainly works well in Denmark.
Okay. Do you want to say anything on it?
Yeah, I think that in Denmark, the tourist industry, they make all kind of certifications, and you could have like a green certification, and that could be how big a percentage of your food is locally and organically grown. And if you had a high percentage, then you would have special favors. And that is very attractive to Danish hotels. They try like mad to become popular, to have a big percentage of local and organic food.
Okay, good. Mahdi.
Just want to add one more point which hasn't been raised yet, which is what happens to organic waste on this island? There's the nearly 1 million people or so who live here, and then all the tourists, and an awful lot of organic waste is generated by them, both in terms of the food they eat as well as the bodily fluids that they discharge as well. Now that, I think, is actually a very important issue, because when you travel across this island, as we did very briefly over the last couple of days, you see a lot of denuded land that looks like it's gone very infertile. And I think one of the key issues is not only from the point of view of land productivity, but also from the point of view of ultimately dealing with carbon emissions, and also with dealing with the capacity of soils to absorb water and retain water. When you get rid of the organic content of soils, all of this gets diminished. The water can no longer hold water. The soil can no longer hold water. The soil is not rich in compost and doesn't grow crops very well any longer. So I think whilst you have tourists, and certainly that the population is already here, let us think seriously about how organic matter, particularly from a city like Palma, needs to be returned to the land, rather than there always being a one-way traffic of nutrients and fertility from the land to the city and then to the sea and never to be returned to the land. I think that's a really important part of looking after future generations and the capacity to feed themselves sustainably.
Jose, you were nodding your head.
Well, this is we had this big problem in France using les bouts d'épuration, je sais pas comment.
Manure.
Sewage waste, the sewage that once you've purified the water, there's a residue.
This is very dangerous, but this is poison.
Well, it depends on you know.
No, but if you take a population, a big mess of thing, it's very difficult to cut it. But there's another issue, so maybe we can try to do it, but I was thinking about this. This is not an example about agriculture, but how you can use gas coming from all that.
Biogas, yeah.
Biogas. 20 million people coming here each year. That means a lot of gas. And this gas, you can use it for the bus and for the cars. And this is not completely crazy. You have this, for example, in a big city in north of France, which is called Lille. All the city of Lille and all the agglomeration, all the buses of the city are working with gas coming from that.
And New Delhi as well.
And New Delhi.
Yeah, so this is really possible. And it's incredible to import oil for cars when you have so big ship. This is maybe the best thing that the tourists bring.
Well, it's a very interesting subject, is it not? In Austria, you may be interested to know, the big farmers who also accommodate tourists, they have a big tank, and the manure from the animals goes in there, but they're very glad of the tourists also bringing all that stuff as well and leaving it there. And that is certainly returned to the land. And by the way, the Soil Association in the UK, which is the Organic Farmers Association, until recently didn't want anything to do with sewage. They've had second thoughts, because we have to find a way of taking all those potash, nitrate, phosphates, as well as the carbon, contained not only, by the way, in sewage, but also in the organic waste coming from cities, and returning it to the land. So organic waste also includes all the food waste, also cardboard and recycled paper and stuff like that. Also tree clippings and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Garden
worked in
clippings.
Adelaide in Australia, where this is being done very, very cautiously and very carefully. Sewage being returned to the land for farming and organic waste being returned to the land as compost to enrich soil. So this is a really critical issue for sustainable cultivation in the future.
And Jose, what about food growing in cities? Apart from farming, the gardening and the city urban food growing, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, but of course, in the general way, but I'm not sure that the situation here is adapted for that. The villages, all the people in the villages, they can have their garden for making agriculture. That's not a problem. But in the big cities, when you have big hotels, we're not going to put chicken upstairs. And it's going to be difficult to have some tomatoes everywhere. So that means that you need to build the cities in a different way.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
this is cities where people are living. These are not artificial cities to accept more people than people are really living here.
Okay.
So that's what I believe.
Yeah, Herbie.
I think we need to differentiate between what is called intra-urban agriculture and peri-urban agriculture. Intra-urban agriculture being growing crops within cities. And by the way, I was in Cairo not so long ago, and there were cows on the 10th floor of the buildings, even on hotels. So occasionally tourists get killed by falling cows, So maybe we don't want that in Parma, but anyway. But certainly peri-urban agriculture, for instance, in China, Shanghai as a city is surrounded by an area the size of the city itself that is therefore cultivating crops for food, consumed within the city. So certainly, even if it's not a current tradition, it is certainly worth looking at wasteland on the edge of Parma, for instance, and say, can that be used for vegetable crop cultivation? I think that's perfectly.
And what about the example of Havana?
Well, Havana, you had that is intra-urban cultivation, where very large areas of land within the cities are used for cultivating. But you've had some difficult experience about Cuba, I believe. Maybe you shouldn't look at that now.
Well, this is maybe not the issue of the debate, but
Okay.
I'm not sure it's so.
I mean, although it has not been possible, key points. Now, when we come back after tea, this will be your chance to come back with ideas on these points which we have discussed. If you have any comment, but please remember that we are here trying to brainstorm with positive ideas. What can be done? Not what is wrong, what should be sort of, not analysis of wrong, but what are the pointers which can point us towards something new, constructive program, which, and I would like to talk about manifesto thing next time, that when we create a manifesto, the manifesto will be the positive program.
That's the first lesson we should learn here in this island. This is our first.
One excellent idea that I think Jose had before was to revalue what is very important from the island. For example, we have a great natural richness of carob trees. Carobs.
Yeah. Carob trees.
Carob trees.
Yeah.
In the 30s, just after the Spanish Civil War, we did a chocolate with carob.
Yeah.
That would be a source. Second, almonds. With almonds, with the nut, we do great nougat.
Yeah.
And with the shell, used to be burned in my grandparents' house for the heating system.
Yeah.
So you have the nougat tweed, and then with the shell, you can heat your house in the winter.
There you go.
Nothing thrown away.
Yeah.
Third thing, oranges. We have the best oranges in the world.
Yeah.
Great confiture, great jam. That's fantastic. And we leave them fall down.
Yeah.
Fourth thing, olives.
Yeah.
We can do great
Olive oil.
olive oil, which is fantastic. And I think that also the pigs,
Yeah.
if they are fed all year round by the farmers,
Yeah.
with the fig trees, with the
Yeah.
figs, the
Yeah.
figs are very
should
good
work
also
with
to
the
make marmalade
tourism office.
to feed the pigs. We can restart the wheel again.
Yeah, yeah,
And then, if we are able to put value
Yeah.
to these processes
yeah.
of natural richness, natural wealth, we can reinvent the economics system of the island.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Just one, I would like to respond to that comment. The power of ideas is something not to be underestimated. And when you have power of ideas and vision, then you need commitment to those ideas. They are not just for discussing here and then forgetting them tomorrow. You have to make commitment that we are going to implement these ideas. Then you need to organize people. It's not like, take Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, great leaders. How did the women who created Vote for the Women, the suffragettes, all those became possible because they organized. So from this 2 days of discussion, we have power of ideas. We want commitment to those ideas, to explore those ideas further and organize in such a way that people power of idea, but also power of the people. That is what eventually will, so bottom-up revolution is what I think we are looking into. It's not wishing that government will do it. Government is not going to do it, but government has a vested interest. But if people want it, and there's a groundswell of opinion, and everybody wants to see Mallorca organic and sustainable and beautiful and green and lovely and a happy home for everybody, then you will have a new government. So do not despair.
So this meeting is all about putting together a mosaic of ideas that hang together, well, hopefully at the end of 2 days. But then the question is how to amplify these ideas. And this has really not been discussed very much, but there will be opportunities, I'm sure, by tomorrow evening we will have a clear idea about how these ideas can be amplified. And certainly in that context, once again, there needs to be funds available to spread ideas. Ideas don't just, I mean, obviously there's word of mouth spreading of ideas, but beyond that, there needs to be ways in which ideas can get into the media. That needs to be coherent reports. You've done a wonderful job compiling mainly a dossier of problems, but now linking that dossier and building it up further into a coherent picture of what could be certainly requires a certain amount of funding, hence the idea of a fund for the future. And then the question of Council of Wise People, well, something like a World or a Mallorca Future Council that really looks ahead and above what else is motivated by concern about future generations and how they will live here. I think that begins to add up to something that hangs together and could become influential and ultimately also become politically influential. Because it's not good enough just to have this as culturally influential ideas, but they need to ultimately become politically influential as well. And that again requires funds.
Okay, please. Yes.
Yeah, well, I just thought I'd make the people here aware of a movement which is called the Transition Towns Movement. How many, you know about that? Do you know about the Transition Towns Movement? How many know about that?
Yeah.
Okay, because this is a movement which is based precisely on the idea of getting the citizens in individual towns and other communities motivated to attack the question of what do we do with the twin crises of climate change and peak oil? How do we make our community sustainable over a long time frame, let's say over the next 20 years or whatever time frame you choose? And there is a wealth of material available on the internet and also in a book written by Rob Hopkins, which is outlining procedures and suggestions as how you could organize yourselves, what steps you should be going through, and so forth. I don't have that all in my head personally, but I would recommend that you consider organizing yourselves along those lines and contacting other members of this group. There are quite a number now, particularly in the UK and in the United States. And I highly recommend that you make contact with that group.
Good. So,
Okay, my question. I want to make a proposal. Is to put on the table the transition concept, towns in transition. I think it's a very good tool to arrive at this. We've been talking about ideas, proposals. With your idea, Satish, of having a brainstorming, but I think the transition concept can be very interesting. I want to read you very quickly, especially for those who don't know the transition town movement. It's a very simple, I can't see very well, but firstly, what they suggest is that we first have to agree on the fact that we need a change. Present models are no longer useful. We need to agree on that. Secondly, that our communities don't have the capacity to react to the grave energy shocks that will come due to peak oil. Third, we need to act of our own accord, and we have to do it now. We don't have to fall asleep. The problem really is urgent. Don't want to stress you out, but this is the fact. Also, to let the potential of the community free in order to create new ways of living that are more connected and that will not damage the planet. I want to stress the fact that the world is going to change. If we're not aware of this, we can just do little fixes here and there. This is what I want to say. We have to be aware of this reality.
The Transition Towns movement in the UK, which actually started in Ireland, then has spread to the UK and is now spreading into many other places, is really very significant, because it is, for the first time for many years, a sort of giving people a sense of empowerment at the local level. And that's certainly to do with all, with at least thinking about energy efficiency, renewable energy, local cultivation, changes in, local transport systems and so on. But the important point to make also is that it is also now hitting a point of frustration. And why? Because what local communities are beginning to realize, and they're discussing this now amongst themselves, is that unless, for instance, take renewable energy, there's national legislation in place that allows people at the local level to make a cost-effective investment in renewable energy. You can talk until you're blue in the face at the local level, and nothing is going to happen in real terms. So the transition town movement in the UK is now saying that we need to get together. In this case, in Spain, it would be mainly Mallorca getting together with Ibiza, getting together with Barcelona and so on, and saying, okay, we create a community-based lobby, but bringing communities all over the country together in ways that then become a national pressure group. And I think in order to make real changes and really significant breakthroughs, ultimately that kind of coalition is necessary, going beyond only your own locality.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Javi. Comment there? Yeah.
It's in my hand, so I'll make the most of it. At home, we live off communication and tourism. What Susan has been saying has helped me to reflect and think. I think we need to start to make a campaign of information about the effects of tourism. If we had a nuclear power station here, we would know the risks. We would know what would be the consequences. It's only an example. If we had that, we would know the effects. We have accepted with our open arms the tourism, and the tourism has destroyed our way of life, our agriculture, our landscape. And there's the base. We don't have a conscience in Mallorca that tourism brings us this negative feedback, as well as the financial side it brings in. And I'd never really thought about that until I started coming to these gatherings a couple of years ago.
Repeat, you don't have the baseline yet. You don't have the baseline. You have to get the baseline study that will tell you what you can say that is true. Because when you start doing that sort of work, you have to be really sure that you're not talking nonsense, because the government would take great pleasure in showing that you, yeah.
Soc Josep Manyà.
Hello, it's Josep. I'm a designer and teacher, pedagogue, and also I grow vegetables. For me, what we've been talking about from the proposals of José Bové, it means an implication, a cooperation of the local communities into food sovereignty. They need to cooperate on this. Therefore, I think that this issue, which for me is so important, the co-responsibility in producing your own food, it's very necessary, therefore, to have examples, specific examples. That could be specific towns, like pilot projects, for example, villages, where the local community, together with the council, the local government, could take all the rural agricultural land, owned or not, from the area to actually, wherever possible, to self-supply the food of that area. For me, this is a crucial point. Another of the actions I would suggest is that young people have an experience of contact with the land. In this sense, in our country, a few years ago now, the military service is no longer compulsory, but I think that a social service could perhaps be put into place where in an emergency situation, and I think that this, as a teacher, I can say that young people could really benefit from having this experience, because young people are so open to the immediate future, so sensitive to this, that to actually get them to get involved and participate in this issue, in this problem, would increase the activity, the rural activity. Hello, my name is Maria Antonia. I work in the tourist sector, trying to promote sustainability projects. The conversations today arouse in me various ideas. I'd like to have a bridge, or between us all to create a bridge between ecologists and activists and the powers that be, the businessmen, the government. For this, my idea or concept, which I'm trying to apply within the business sector, but I think here it also would make sense, is to revalue, give a good value to the sustainability of the island, to give value, public value, to the cultural, environmental, natural resources of the island, to make it compatible, the local interest with the tourist interest. I think this would help us to generate an added value which would allow us to position the island on a qualitative level that would allow us to attract a different type of tourism. The selection of tourists, for me, is made by the price. And that price is determined by the value that we are able to add to the product. And I want to make sustainability one of those added values of tourism.
Hi, my name is Marco Robledo. I'm the director of the School of Tourism of the University of the Balearic Islands. And answering your question before, I have to say that probably tourism is the most well-researched activity in the whole island. You have plenty of studies from the economic point of view, from the geographical point of view, impacts and everything. But what we need probably is doing research from a different perspective. For example, what Maria Antonia was suggesting, that new ways of doing the research that we don't have these kind of studies. Secondly, can we move away from tourism, as some people is suggesting here? Within the current paradigm, I don't think so. I mean, we are living in a global world, and that would be being or moving totally against the tide, and that would be impossible. That doesn't think that we shouldn't think our tourism model. I think that we have an urge and we have a need to change our tourism model. And why haven't we changed this tourism model if we have been working here in the Balearic Islands, the government, the university, the companies, everyone for 30 years trying to change this model of quantity for a model of quality? Probably because there's too many, the machinery is too big to be stopped, and as well because Now we have a crisis now at this moment, and this crisis could mean an opportunity to change our mindset. So what we need probably at this moment is we need creativity within the Ireland, because we didn't have enough creativity so far. So far we've been adopting things that other people have been doing, other regions, other countries have been doing in tourism and in other things. So probably what we need now is a lot of creativity and really be innovators here. If we are the leaders of in Spain and in the world in tourism, we have to really be innovators, and so far we've been only followers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do you want last one?
Última contribución. My name is Rafael. I come here now and again. I would like to take this flag in favor of Mallorca. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Let's start again. Please ask him to start again. Okay, he's going to speak Spanish, which would help us a lot, because we can't see his face, so it's difficult to translate him. I have a flag, but it's not nationalist, so I'm not bothered about it. Okay, so taking on the idea of Satish, that you cannot offer something that you don't have within. I think that if Mallorca is not healthy within, few things it can offer. It has few things to offer. So we need to think more about Mallorca, and then we can offer. But we're offering without knowing what we have. I think that the ideas that have been talked about regarding tourism, Susan's ideas, could be good for our children. Scientific investigation, literature, talking about the Mediterranean, to reposition ourselves. This would be good for our children. And then if we have some left over, we can offer it to somebody else. But not to dwell too much on that, because all our life we've been part of two Mallorcas. One which is from June to September, and then the rest of the year. That's the two Mallorcas. Those of us who are here, who find closed restaurants because there's no tourists, the train's not going because there's no tourists, the hospital is next to the sea instead of next to the village because there's no tourists in the village, they're all by the sea. And these things happen because we're always thinking about tourism. But here we also live, and we need to focus on ourselves, and then we can start to offer good things to the outside. Another idea that might be good for this healthy Mallorca, and which we could then offer, José Bové could maybe help us. Since we have declared Mallorca free of transgenics, of GMs, to actually declare ourselves free of franchise. No franchises on the island. Therefore, artisans, the little restaurants, the little artisans, the man who makes the baskets, they can work and have their own business. All these businesses I find when I travel around the world, which my mum says, I don't know if I'm going to Barcelona, if I'm in Palma, I'm in Madrid, I'm not sure, everything looks the same. So here we could make a change in which nothing is the same, everything is different. Wonderful.
With this very wonderful comment, we are ending this session. I'm happy to welcome, what is his name? Le Basset. Thank you. Welcome, Le Basset.
I had one good idea.
Yeah.
You need trendsetters to change the way of thinking. You need trendsetters to change ways people think.
Yeah.
A few years ago, they gave something like $2 million to Michael Douglas, Ibatour, to represent the idea of the island in all the tourist fairs. Michael Douglas, the glamour of Hollywood. If we want to change mentalities, why don't we give $4 million to José Bové?
Yeah. Thank you. Let's create a $4 million next Nobel Prize for Jose Bove. Now, when we come back from tea, you have kindly offered to do a bit of comedy.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's a great pleasure for me to see. I've never seen your clowning and comedy.
Yes, yes.
I will have to prepare. A bit late.
A bit later.
A bit later. I'll prepare.
Okay, a bit later. This evening we will have a little comedy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So enjoy your tea. I would like to teach you a song. It's in English.
Ça va. Merci.
I'm sure most of you will easily find it. Now, would you like to stand up?
Yes.
But please mind the windows. Don't hit your head. It's a song about beauty. I think what ultimately we want to see is beautiful Mallorca. As long as it's beautiful, I don't mind what you do. Do whatever you like. Make sure that it's beautiful. Tourism, I don't mind as long as it does not make the place less beautiful. So, this is the song of the American Indian Hopi tribe. Walk in beauty before me. I walk in beauty behind me. I walk in beauty above me. I walk in beauty below me. I walk in beauty all around me. Mallorca is beautiful. Mallorca is beautiful. Mallorca is beautiful. Ho! Ho! You have to say ho in the end. I mean, the original Hopi is the whole world is beautiful, but we'll change it to Mallorca is beautiful. Okay, now we all sing together. I walk in beauty before me. I walk in beauty behind me. I walk in beauty above me. I walk in beauty below me. I walk in beauty all around me. Mallorca is beautiful. Mallorca is beautiful. Mallorca is beautiful. Ho! Please sit down.
Hello, my name is Marisol. I think as everyone here, I'm very happy to be here and grateful. I'd like to be able to talk tomorrow about something Josep Bové started talking about, and which is very dear to me. Those people with common sense who've come here have maybe struggled to understand this, but we're a submissive island. We're not used to protesting. And perhaps in small circles and where there's a lot of trust, we can talk about certain things, but not in public and not collectively. Perhaps it would be interesting with some activists such as yourselves and with a figure, an icon such as Josep Bové, to actually lift our power, to actually stand up and point at our leaders, political leaders and business leaders, as the ones who've stolen our landscape, they've stolen our resources, our traditions, and in the name of tourism we have lost the island. It's not about criticizing, yes, but it is about analyzing and know what's happened to us to allow ourselves to be treated this way. And what's the alternative? How can we protest? I would appreciate suggestions as to civil disobedience movements, how to call the attention of the media and also of the government and that shadow government. Dear Susan George, there is a shadow government in the Balearics, but unfortunately it's not made up by the Balearic peoples, but rather by their businessmen. So we need to have a shadow government of the shadow government of the real government.
Please raise your hands here, Marcus.
Good evening. I just wanted to see maybe where we're going to go tomorrow with regards to best practices with education and the schooling systems. We've spoken a lot, it's complex, and how we filter that down to schools from 2-year-olds up to 18-year-olds and beyond, and how we can incorporate that into curriculums.
Good. Thank you.
Well, for me it was interesting because when I arrived, I really didn't know how things are going to go on.
Yeah.
So in the beginning it was quite difficult to try to find what is going to be the issue of this work. Now, after this first day, I think I see better the way it's going to go on, and I think that things can go now. But if we want, I think most of the people are here have a good analysis of the situation. But if we want to change things, we really need to know where we want to go. And the strategy for action and for constructive project, for having these things, you need to have an objective, to know really what kind of Mallorca we want to build. This is really the need. So I hope that tomorrow night maybe we can try to find this common idea. Where do we want to go? And when we know that, it's possible to put on a strategy. But it's very difficult to put on a strategy if you don't know where you want to go on. So there are a lot of analysis, and I heard a lot today, and now I think we need to build this common idea.
Okay.
And after a strategy is very easy and funny. Very funny.
One way of doing it, which we often use is when a new group wants to create an eco-village, is that you have a big piece of paper and then you make a futures workshop. Everybody comes up with ideas, all the things that they want to create in the future, just all the dreams on the wall, and it gives a wonderful feeling that these are the common dreams, all the dreams, and then you start organizing them, and then you can make steps and processes and whatnot. But that could be a possibility for doing that tomorrow. When people create new eco-villages, what they usually do is they travel to visit the best places they can think of. And often that's very useful because in that way they stand on each other's shoulders. They learn from each other, and it's a different thing to visit the place and see everything they've done and learn from all their mistakes, and that way you very easily find out what is it really that we want to do. That's a kind of difficulty, but it's a possibility, and I'd be very happy to help organize some kind of trip. In Denmark they go to all the Danish eco-villages. You might want to visit other places. I can come up with many good ideas. And the third possibility would be like that some of you chose to either create an instead of calling it eco-village design course, you could call it Mallorca Sustainability Design Course. That would be the same, the content would be the same. And it could be like 4 weeks separate, or it could be like 2 times 2 weeks, whatever way. Or it could be a combination of a virtual course, 1 week together, and the rest you could take at home or in your local groups, wherever you live. So there are many different ways of organizing. And in this education, all the knowledge from all these different places around the world of how to create sustainability locally would be available. Lots of films and videos and whatnot.
Good, thank you, thank you. I think it has been